Electronisounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Dean from Electronisounds. I found an awesome sampler for iPad, and I'm going to share it with you guys today. This is AudioLayer from VirSyn, and it's super easy to use. Let's get into this. Okay, let's take a quick overview of our setup today. We're starting with an iPad Pro, and I'm connecting that to an audio interface using the USB-C to Lightning multi-port adapter, not Lightning, but the USB-C multi-port adapter from Apple. If this was an older iPad, then you would need the USB to Lightning adapter, but this is the newer iPad with the USB-C connection on it. It works exactly the same as the Lightning connection. It's just a different piece of plastic with a different connector at the end. We've got this connected to an audio interface. I'm using the Novation Audio Hub 2x4 today. This is my preferred interface for working with iPads. Unfortunately, Novation has canceled the production of this interface. Maybe you can still find a few of these online on like eBay or reverb.com in a used format. This is a fantastic interface for using with iPads, but any audio interface will work. And if you do not know how to connect an audio interface to your iPad, I've got a video on that, and I'll put a link up in the corner to that video. I'm also using the Novation Launch Key Mini today as a MIDI controller. This is just plugged in via a USB cable over here to our Novation Audio Hub 2x4 so that I can get this talking to the iPad. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be sampling some sounds out of my VirSyn Darkstar right into the iPad so that we can use these in the iPad in a portable situation or inside of an jam or something like that. Before we start actually sampling into AudioLayer today, I thought I would go over a few reasons why you might actually want to sample your hardware synths into the iPad using something like this. Maybe you just want to use your favorite hardware synth sounds inside of an jam on the iPad. Maybe you just want to play your favorite hardware synth sounds out at live shows, but you don't want to carry your hardware synth out to those gigs. Maybe you are out of the studio a lot and you just want to be able to work with your favorite hardware synth sounds anytime, any place, anywhere, on the go. Or maybe you don't have any hardware synths at all, but you have a friend who does, and now you have a way to sample some of those awesome sounds from your friend's gear into your iPad and easily make playable patches. Or maybe you just want to wait to go super deep with sound design and creatively layer, filter, and process and effect your sounds to come up with entirely new and deep custom sounds. This isn't going to be a masterclass on samplers and sampling today, but rather we're going to keep things as absolutely simple as possible. We're going to go ahead and create a new patch for us to go ahead and be able to sample into AudioLayer. We'll press in the browser up here, and in the bottom left-hand corner of the browser, we've got a button for adding a new instrument. This is going to give we have to give a name right at the beginning because it's going to create a folder with that name where it will store all of the samples that we record into AudioLayer for this instrument. We're going to go ahead and just do a test today. So we'll just do a simple test folder. And here we've got our instrument test. All we need to do is just click on the little triangle where it says open or record a sample for the new zone. And we're going to get these three options available to us. Our first option is just to record some audio from the audio interface that's connected to our iPad. The second option will allow us to browse the iPad or any files we've got stored on the iPad, or like maybe some samples you've recorded in the Beatmaker 3 app or another app. And the third option over here will allow you to do the copy-paste from the Audio Share app from Kymatica. Super easy as well if you've got a whole bunch of samples recorded or stored in the Audio Share app. We're going to be recording from the audio interface today, so I'll just click record audio and we're going to go ahead and get our sampler window open. By default, the monitoring of this is turned off. We want to go ahead and hear what we're recording in, so I'm going to go ahead and press this little mute button in the bottom left to make sure that we can hear the audio. Now I'll walk around to the keyboard over here and I'm going to go ahead and press a C note. And we'll check our level going into the iPad. The level looks pretty good, so we'll let the rest of that note ring out there. I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button, and I'm going to go ahead and hit a C on the virus. We'll wait till that rings out and that we're seeing no noise or volume coming through. We'll go ahead and press stop there, and then we'll go ahead and get in here and edit this sample. It takes a lot of work and energy to make all these videos. If you've been enjoying my content, I'd like to encourage you to support the channel by clicking the little like button under this video right here. It really helps out the channel. Now, you don't need to sample your note in on a C. You can sample your note in on whatever you like, and you can change the root note inside of AudioLayer once you've recorded it. But if you want to keep things simple and keep your steps to an absolute minimum, if you record your note in on C, the app is going to default to playback your note on C. We're going to go ahead and start moving in a little bit so that we can move these start and stop points here and get right in on the beginning of our sample. We're going to keep zooming in. We're going to keep zooming in all the way until we can see right in at the beginning of our sample. I think I'm going to put our start point right about there, and we're going to go ahead and, well, it might be a little bit too loud. Turn my volume quite a bit down at home there. There we go. That sounds pretty good, and we'll go ahead and click save. For all practical purposes today, we're just going to give this the same name as we gave the file in the beginning, which was test. And then here we see we've actually got our sample trimmed to the start point that I set. We can go ahead and, maybe adjust that end point if we needed to, but for now, I think I'll just leave it there. And by default, we are already playing back the sample that we recorded. And because we recorded this in on a C, when I hit a C, it's playing back the actual note that we recorded here. This is on C4. Now let's say we want to adjust the envelope of this sound so that when I press the key, we hear more of the actual sound. Let's see here. We're going to go over to the envelope page. So from the wave display, we're going to go ahead and we can click over here on the little circle with the line through it icon. I'm sure that's not what that's supposed to be called, sorry. And we'll go over here to the level side of this. And this is the amplitude envelope for our sound. And we can adjust this as necessary. So we can bring the release up, maybe quite a bit, so that the sound plays out. We can actually look in the little display here, and you can see the playhead following along with the sample to kind of represent your envelope here. So you can see if you want to maybe set that release time a little bit further out so that it plays more or less of your sample, depending on the type of sound that you're sampling. For this kind of a sound, kind of a chilled sound, we probably want a pretty good delay, a good envelope release so that the sound rings out just a little bit. Here we can change the amount of on the left here of our instrument settings. We can change the amount of voices. Currently it's set to no limit for the amount of voices, but if we move this, we can change it down to one voice, so it plays mono only. Maybe handy for like a bass patch that you've sampled. Or we can give this some more voices if we want. Like 3 voices will allow us to play 3 notes. And now we can play some chords. If we don't want the next chord to cut off the last chord, maybe we need just a few more voices. Maybe we give 9 voices. And down at the C here, you can spread these voices out so you can get a little bit of, like sort of unison stuff happening here. And a little bit of stereo field action happening in your sound. There's no direct sound today. It's just really important that you guys hear the dialogue rather than the sound itself, because the sound itself is what you guys are going to be sampling into AudioLayer. So one of the things that's awesome about AudioLayer is not only do we get the amplitude envelope, but we also get a filter. We can put in a 24 ladder filter, 24 decibel ladder filter, a 12 decibel low pass filter, a 24 decibel low pass filter. We've got some band pass and high pass filters also. So lots of options there. You've also got, you can maybe like turn one of these on. You've also got some LFO and some envelope adjustments for your filter, and you've got a pitch envelope over here as well. Once you've maybe got the sound sounding a little bit, playable, but maybe you want to add some more effects to it, you've got a whole other tab here in AudioLayer where you've got all these different effects you can add to your sound. You can add some drive to your sound. In fact, there's a few different options for what kind of drive you'd like to add. We've got a hard drive, a soft drive, a tape drive, and a tube drive. They each have a little bit of their own sort of sound quality to them. We've got a parametric EQ, and I'd like to note that when you click on one of these effects, down here in the bottom bar, you're going to end up with a whole lot more options for that effect as well. They're not limited to just the 2 dials. Each time you click on one, you're going to get a few more options at the bottom. For instance, this phaser gives you a feedback, a delay, and a dry wet amount. The flanger over here gives you a feedback, a delay, and a dry wet. On the delay, you've got all sorts of sync settings over here. You can sync to tempo, or you can keep it free running. You've got a chorus over here with all the controls you'd expect, the depth, the feedback, the delay, the spread, and the dry wet. And you've got a really great reverb as well with lots of customization at the bottom. You've got room size and diffusion and all that kind of good stuff. You can also bring the reverb time itself up to 100 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, of reverb time. So the reverb in this is quite extreme, if you get my drift. You can really do a lot of shaping to the sounds that you sample into AudioLayer using the built-in filter and the built-in effects. Another thing that's really awesome about the AudioLayer sampler is that you can record into it directly with the microphone on your iPad. So I've unplugged the audio interface here, and we can go ahead and click on the browser up here and click plus instrument to add a new instrument. You can maybe call this mouth demo or something to that effect. And then we can click the open record sample for new zone button, and I can click record audio. We can see that it's picking up my vocal here. So if I'm just quiet for a sec and hit the start button, I can go ahead and record something into the iPad. Boop. Maybe that's a little loud, so boop. There we go. Got a little boop there. So we'll go ahead and adjust the start and end points on that. We'll go ahead and start zooming in here. Whoop. I'll zoom a little bit more until we get that looking pretty good. Maybe bring this a little bit closer and hit save. Maybe we just call this boop, right? And then I can already play this back from the built-in keyboard. If I plug in the audio interface again to get connectivity to my MIDI controller, let it connect there. Now I'm already, able to play back that recording. What we can do is something like that. Maybe, turn on the reverb or something. Maybe bring the volume up just a tiny bit. Maybe bring that up a lot so you can really hear what I'm talking about, how dramatic you can get with the reverb here. The effects in this app really invite you to have a play, and I really suggest that you have a play. One of the really neat things about AudioLayer is that it recognizes the pitch of the sounds that you record into it. I know I said earlier that it's easiest to record a note on C, and that's just a really great habit to be into because it'll kind of, be a standard with any other sampler you put the sample into in the future. C is just a really good note to be in the habit of sampling on. But let's say that you don't want to sample on a C. Maybe your song is in the key of F, for instance, and maybe you want to sample the root note of F of a synth sound so that it's as rich as possible on that root note. We can go ahead and click the open record a new sample button, and we can go ahead and click the record audio button. We can unmute that just so we can hear what we're doing, and I can go ahead and hit start, and I can go ahead and hit an F, right? You can let that go ahead and play out, and I'll hit stop. Just do a super quick edit for the purposes of this tutorial. Now this was an F4 that I played in. We're gonna go ahead and hit the save button. We'll let it label it whatever it wants to label it, that's fine. And we'll look here in the sampler window where it says root note, and we'll see that it's labeled F4 by default, and it knows that it's a one shot and not a loop. So I would definitely recommend to always, check that root note and make sure that it is accurate, that it does detect the pitch of your, sound accurately, but in the off chance that it does not, all we have to do is just click on this. And where it says next note, we can go ahead and click that. And then the next note that we play on the keyboard down here will assign that root note. Let's say it was a C and not an F. Now I would just hit the C3, and now that root note will trigger whenever I hit the C3. But that's incorrect, and it actually is an F4. So we can just hit root, we can hit next note, and I can tap F4, and now it knows that the root note is F4. So if it does not detect the pitch or the root note accurately of the sound you just recorded in, you can always just click on root note, choose next note, and then select what the actual root note is. This is handy as well when you're sampling in things like vocal samples or drum sounds. Maybe you want to make a drum kit where the kick drum is on C2 and the snare is on D2 and the hi-hats are on E2. You can go ahead and adjust those root notes just the way I showed you. Speaking of drum sounds, let's say that you only wanted this sound to play on one key. Let's say you wanted it to play only when you hit the C2, but not when you hit any of the other notes. First, let's go ahead and change the root note of this sound to that key. So we'll choose root, we'll choose next note, and we'll hit C2. Now we just need to adjust the mapping of this sound so that when we press the keys, it doesn't trigger on every single key. We'll go ahead and press the little circle with a minus button on it, icon there. I'm not exactly sure what that is supposed to be called, but here we get our mapping screen up, and what we can do is we can just move this around a little bit until we've selected whatever key or notes that we want the range to be for this specific sound. Here I can go ahead and choose just one note only, C2. And now when I hit any other note besides C2, you can see there's no sample triggering. So I could sample an entire drum kit into the app if I wanted to. Kick, snare, hi-hat, tom, ride, crash, etc., etc. And in the mapping screen, we would just choose whatever sample we wanted, and then we would just adjust its range, as I've done here, so that you can actually, have it go across the whole keyboard if you want, or just one key, or just a little section of the keyboard if you want. You could sample, any number of samples and put them on any number of keys that you want to put. Super, super convenient. I hope you guys have found this useful. And for those of you who aren't real familiar with the workflow of samplers or don't quite understand exactly what you might want to do with the sounds that you're spending the time to create in an app like AudioLayer, one of the things you could do is you can play this instrument in real time with your MIDI controller. You can sequence this with any of the iOS sequencers, like the Rosetta suite of sequencers from Brambos. You can use this instrument directly inside a DAW, like Beatmaker 3 or Cubasis or Nano Studio 2 to write your tracks with. You can actually use something like this to make your own loops in out of the sounds that you've created from scratch. But why would you want to make loops? Well, because then you can use those loops in the same way that you would use any loops in any DAW, except that these are your custom loops from sounds that you've created. You can create loops, you can chop them up, you can rearrange them, and you can use them maybe even inside another app, like the Reslice app from VirSyn. You can create loops inside of something like you can load them into something like Reslice, you can create brand new loops from those loops, and yet you're just further on down the sound design ladder. I hope you guys have found this useful, and until next time, thanks for watching.